Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank Ms. Thompson. I was a state lawmaker for 3 years before I came to Congress. I represent the 1st Congressional District of South Carolina, and South Carolina has had its own history, very bad history with black South Carolinians, black and brown and African Americans. I recently took a vote to move statues like Supreme Court Justice Taney, removing his bust out of the Capitol Rotunda because he wrote the Dred Scott opinion, the one that said that black and brown and African Americans could not become citizens of the United States of America. I voted to move, someone like Wade Hampton, who encouraged the murder of over 150 black South Carolinians during his run for governor. And so I appreciate your comments about the 60s. I was not around then, but I've watched and read a lot of the history and seen the videos and seen the moments of violence against black America. So I applaud your work on that. My understanding is you were elected in 1972 in Texas. Is that correct?
It is correct.
Right, and I applaud you for making history, I imagine, in Texas and being a strong voice for black men and black women. Coming from South Carolina, we've got voter ID. And I'm assuming Texas is the same way. Do y'all need IDs to buy alcohol when you're purchasing at the store?
Yes, to be sure that you are capable of doing that.
Right. Do you need an ID in Texas to buy cigarettes?
You can't buy them unless you're at least 21.
But do you have to show an ID to buy cigarettes?
You have to show an ID.
Do you need an ID when you're getting a job and trying to get on payroll in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID to go to the pharmacy and get a prescription in Texas?
It depends on this prescription.
But do you need an ID for some prescriptions
Yes,
in Texas?
You do. Yes.
Do you need an ID to get Social Security services in Texas?
You do.
Do you need an ID to rent an apartment in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID if you're going to buy a house and finance it via a mortgage in Texas?
Yes.
Do you need an ID in Texas if you're going to board an aircraft and fly commercial?
Yes.
Did you fly commercial or fly a private jet on the way to D.C.?
A chartered plane.
Do you have to show an ID when you fly in a private charter jet?
Yes.
I wouldn't know. I've never flown on one. So did you need an ID to get in the building here today?
Yes.
Do you need an ID in Texas to open a bank account?
Yes.
To cash your check if you're working. Do you know, Representative Thompson, what percentage of blacks in Texas, black and brown and African Americans, are registered to vote?
Oh, a huge percentage.
70%. Do you know what percentage of African Americans, black and brown Texans have voted on average or in the last election?
About 64%.
Correct. Do you know how many whites are registered to vote in Texas?
Far more than African Americans.
72%. You have 70% of blacks in Texas who are registered to vote. You have 72% of whites in Texas who are registered to vote. Do you know the percentage of whites who turned out to vote in recent elections?
I want to say over 50-some percent.
65%. Yeah. Do you know what percentage of Hispanics are registered to vote in Texas?
No, I do not.
63%. Do you know what percentage of Hispanics voted in the last election?
I think it was over 40%.
53%. Hispanics are not voting in as high numbers as blacks and whites in Texas. Do you know the percentage of Democrats that support voter ID?
Would you repeat your question?
Do you know the number or percentage of Democrats who support voter ID in this country?
I do not, but I don't think it's a whole lot.
72%. Do you know the number of black and brown and African Americans in this country who support voter ID?
No.
75%. Do you know the number of Hispanics that support voter ID in this country?
No.
81%. Do you know where the state of Texas is ranked with black voter turnout in this country?
With black voters turnout?
Mm-hmm. Do you know where Texas is ranked?
Oh, about 44%.
The latest numbers that I read this morning was that Texas is ranked 10th. Do you know where Texas is ranked? So then top 10 in the country. Do you know where Texas is ranked with women voters?
Oh, way up in the 50s.
in the bottom third of this country. So I would argue that Texas has a more difficult problem with getting women out to vote than Black and brown and African Americans. Thank you, and I yield back.